Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Trade Stock. Super excited for the guests we have in the studio today. We have Orlando Castillo of the Sales Collective. He is the VP of Sales Transformation over there and has helped us over the years. It's been a couple of years, I think. We've been working on our sales process at K&D, and it has been an amazing process to go through. So I'm just excited to talk about sales, to talk about Orlando's background, and a little bit about, well, how we're going to get more revenue in the door through documenting our process. So without further ado, let's jump in. Welcome Orlando to the studio. Orlando, welcome to Trade Stock, brother.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Well, thanks for taking the time. We've been across Zoom calls a number of times talking about the K&D sales process. And as we wrapped that up, I thought, man, I'd love to have you on the Trade Stock and share a little bit of what we've been working on and what really you've been doing for many years, which is helping people document really what's made them successful. And this is something I want to start right in and go right after is, what is a sales process and why is it important to have one in a company?
Well, that's an easy and a difficult question. Woo! It's an easy and a difficult question. Easy in the sense of it's a way to document and understand what you are doing from beginning, middle, and end of the sales journey. And Justin, a lot of times people look at it as, well, I'm just selling something. And you kind of have to think about the buyer. So it's not a seller's journey, it's a buyer's journey. Yeah. And so the high level is, who are you selling to? I'll talk about that a little while. What is a bullseye target when you're tiering? And I'll use the word ideal customer profile. Yeah. Then who are the buyers? What are their personas? You've seen it in marketing that you have a persona that you're marketing to. Then you kind of look at who should you talk to, and who should you recognize who could be an advocate or a champion, but not a actual buyer, not a financial buyer. And then there's a list of things, and those culminate in a way where you can have it easily trackable, doable. Sometimes in the EOS world, they call it followed by all. And that turns into a playbook. And so that playbook should be, even in your case, something that's evergreen, something that's constantly being updated, but something that allows for a system or a process to be recognized. And you can track that, you can audit, you can enhance it, you can iterate on it, and it allows you to modify and find your levers so you can optimize that sales process. Because if it's just, hey, we're going to go sell landscape designs, jump on me and let's go look at maybe Your Haven or something like that, and we're just going to go door to door to sell. That's not quite a real method. And so I have kind of committed my career, Justin, to focusing on how do you put together these processes and methods. And I try to lean in on what do you really know about your business so that we can pull up best practices and find a way to optimize and build a sales process that is not just clean and good, but works for your CRM, your customer relationship management system, your revenue recognition, as well as how are you bringing things into the top of your funnel. I'll pause there and see, what would you like to explore?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, you outlaid it really well. And I think every business struggles with this. It's just at what level. The biggest of the biggest businesses struggle and the smallest business struggles. And I think the biggest challenge that we found is when you go from one or two people selling, for our case, it was me and my dad, to now over 30 people that generate proposals in our system. The documentation of how we do things is so important. But you mentioned something that most people, I think, miss when they think about process and they think about sales process specifically is evergreen. It's a living document. And a lot of folks, myself included, I just thought I had to create these systems in my business. I built a machine and then the machine ran. Like I didn't have to really maintain it. But it's much more maintenance than I have ever actually thought about. And when we got into our process, I'm realizing just how much updating, changing, And really it's like adapting to the world that we live in on an ongoing basis. When we talk about that evergreen document, the levers and changes, what are some things to watch out for that may show up? And it's like, hey, it's time to maybe update the way you do sales, update the buyer's journey a little bit in a company. Are there some key indicators around that?
I think so. Let's talk about your journey for a second, and then we'll jump right into what you asked about. In terms of like, there's a certain layer of automation and there's a certain layer of like Aspire or standard operating procedures, and how people learn that. And, you create a kind of a change management layer. Hey, if we change something in Aspire, we change an SOP, it needs to be transmitted. Everybody needs to be made aware of that change. So the evergreen has an ebb and a flow. It has a life cycle to it. Go figure. Yeah. In landscaping, life cycles. What are some of those key points? Well, can you track your sales stages? That may be the first piece of the puzzle. When you're prospecting, people are talking about, oh, well, I've got a marketing qualified lead, I've got a sales qualified lead, and it's converted into an opportunity, and I need to go follow up on that lead. Great. You're talking about the top of that funnel. So do you have an ideal customer profile that is aligned to whatever your marketing motion is? Because if you say, well, we go after this type of people. Okay. People, business, opportunity, location, what's their revenue, why would they want to talk to you? All these things start to bubble up. And so when you're saying, every business has that. So every business wants customers, they want the leads, and then they have to say, okay, how do I want to start to qualify those? And so every business seems to have these stages where it goes, oh, I found somebody who wants to buy something, and I immediately go to negotiation. Why do they want to buy? Are they a good fit? Are you going to be able to keep them happy? Are they going to have a lifetime value? So your thoughts?
Oh, I love that. I think it's something that we all rush into. We get these we get the eyes that money and sales are, it's the key to everything. So it's like when we see someone that needs landscaping, we just want to go and work for them. And most of the time our sales team doesn't think about those questions of, well, how are we going to fulfill the needs? Are they the right customer? Are they going to provide us with a profitable job or a profitable relationship? Because I can tell you, I don't know what the percentage is, but we were probably 30% of the jobs we did historically were not profitable at all. And then there's another 50% that were probably fairly profitable. And we had it's probably like 80-20, right? Like 20% of the jobs were highly profitable. And it's like, if you can do more than 20% highly profitable jobs, you're going to have a much better business. But how do you train? How do you get to that point where you're actually bringing in the 20%, the high profit customers?
Well, okay. So so you're talking about Pareto and 80% giving you that 20% bump, and then 20% of your business actually paying for 80% of that, revenue coming in, and that kind of goes back and forth. So your question, Justin, was how do you find that? How do you teach that? All right. Well, first you have to double down on what is that 20% of the most profitable jobs. How do you describe those? And so from a sales system and a sales process, if we're structuring it, we might have our ideal customer profile, and as I teased earlier, a bullseye target, the perfect, the one you want. So maybe it's magnitude of size, maybe it's length of time. Everyone might have funds to budget, or that their money is green. Okay. But you look at it in terms of so I'll flip this around to you. How would you look at that top 20%? What are some either characteristics or criteria that we'd be able to pull the thread on so that we could teach 30 proposal makers how to recognize that bullseye target? Talk to me, Justin. What are 3 or 4 factors that I should be aware of that are keywords or situations that I should recognize? Go.
Love how you're turning it around. So one, you need to know who's the decision maker
Okay.
you're talking with. I think
Right.
that's a big one. Number two is you need to identify what their true needs are. Why are they doing this? Are they building a backyard for entertainment, or are
Okay.
they retired and they want a sanctuary? So what are their needs? Number three, what's their budget? What are they willing to spend? And
Okay.
that's a tough question to get to, but you can throw out like, hey, most customers that call with this need typically spend between 50 and 70,000. Is that something that you're comfortable in that range?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll throw something like that. Number four, there's quite a few things running through my head, so I'm trying to pick the final one.
Take your time.
Yeah.
We've got all the time in the world to kind of lay this out, because I'm putting on my Jeremy cap, and I'm thinking about like both what qualifies, disqualifies, or puts you in this elite space.
I like this. So the next qualification, it's really geographic location for us, because we're delivering these services, in physical form. So geographic, what's their budget? What are their needs? And are we talking to the right person? Because I think a lot of times we spend a lot of time trying to sell to maybe the wrong person. So make sure we're talking to the decision maker, the person that's truly wanting this project completed.
Okay. So let's kind of walk through a few of those pieces in a not a formulary, but just kind of dig a little deeper. So you started with, are you talking to the right person? And you ended, are you talking to the right person? Which means there's different types of buyers or different types of people who reach out. You could have somebody who's a property manager, but they may not be the board.
Yep.
It may need to be a board president who actually allots a huge budget for the year for landscaping services or a redesign. And so you might have someone who's the owner of a property, air quotes, and you might have somebody who's the actual owner of the budget, who's going to be held accountable to maybe a homeowners or a condo association or a business or something along those lines. And so you may have a procedural owner and a financial buyer. And if you're able to get to that financial buyer and to the property owner and what they're looking at, and lay in that why are they doing it? Oh, we need landscaping services. So there's maybe a couple levels of why is that. So give me a couple of answers you might hear that would tune your ears to, oh, this is not just a job. This might be a lifetime relationship with this account.
I think first big sign is, the last 3 years we've worked with 3 different landscapers. We've always bought based on price, who's the cheapest. And we just haven't been satisfied with anyone yet. So we're looking for quality over price, just strictly cheap price. The next thing that kind of perks my interest is a multi-year approach. Hey, we've got a large project, or we have, a large budget that we've allocated over the next 2 to 3 years to improve the fire hardiness of our property.
Okay.
And we need help with that. That's another. The next is anything extremely complex, difficult, or hard to solve. So we have an irrigation problem. We've had 5 companies out. They haven't been able to solve it. That for us, that is like, that is ring all the bells. Let's go, because we have the depth of talent to handle those complex situations. The next might be a technology forward board. Hey, we want a company that is technology focused and that can provide dashboards and communication and digital communication rather than just everything on note paper or text and email. So those are a few bells that I listen for. And then the others that may be on the opposite side that would move me away are, hey, we're very cost conscious. We're looking for a quick fix here. Hey, can you come out today or tomorrow because we're in desperate need? So anything kind of like desperation typically isn't going to be the best fit for us. So, knowing what to listen to and knowing what also to listen for that would move you away from the client, I think is important.
Okay. So now you have started to come to a continuum, and this is a little different than, okay, somebody writes an ideal customer profile and a bullseye target. Great. We document it. We train everybody on it. Now they know. But what you just said, Justin, is it's actually a scale. Person wants to race to the bottom and be the cheapest. We need a quick Band-Aid fix. We need something tomorrow. That might not be something that K&D wants to get into, because it's a lose-lose proposition. But you need to be able to maybe document that and train on it. So if we look at it, a bullseye might be, on the left side of the spectrum. And as we move to the middle, this may be a typical, an average, and we might even put a basement in terms of revenue and, what we want to work with. And then we might put some disqualifiers, do not work with. And then at the end of it, do we really want to entertain fast, cheap, and maybe another quality that we don't want to be associated with? And we say, no, we're gonna recommend this happening. And even if you're up on this other end of the spectrum where it feels like a bullseye and it sounds like a bullseye, and then they are 250 to 300 miles away from you, like you just teased, it has to be geographically cost effective for the business to be able to drop in there. So, San Luis Obispo gets into a right spot. There's an irrigation piece. They want a multi-year solution. No one else has been able to do it. It's high profile, high risk, but it's something you can do. And maybe some other folks don't even want to play this game, and they don't want to be transparent, and they don't want to have the dashboards, and they don't want to report on the water usage in California. Now that's something you embrace. So talk to me about what you think about that continuum, especially if it's documented and everybody's trained on it. What could they do with that?
Yeah, you're laying this out so well. So what ends up, I think, happening is you start to empower your team to make decisions. And this is where, if you're watching this on YouTube, guys, you're going to see us celebrating. But this is where we start to scale a sales team. And we're at the very beginning of this. Like, K&D is not mastering this, guys. I'm just wanting to be honest here. We're beginning this journey, but it feels so good when I see a lead get turned down, because it means that our system is working. And at first, an owner, CEO, someone like myself who's been in the trenches, I see a lead turned down. All I see typically is a missed opportunity. And I go, guys, what are we doing? And now they're afraid to turn anything down. So the continuum, the scale, the ability to see an ideal target, and then where is that red line? And that red line is often like a magenta gray line that like kind of,
it's a gradient. It's a gradient across
it. Gradient.
It's not black and white. It's, hey, what would fit us? And if you hear something and you're empowered as a seller to go, whew, let me ask a few more questions. Oh, yeah, you're going to want to go someplace else. Oh, you don't really want to spend that budget. Oh, you've already burned a whole bunch of people. This is going to be a problem. Continue.
Yeah, no, you're right. And a recent example is someone that was just a little bit north of our service area. Great project. It was like 15 minutes outside of our service area, but the edge of our service area is already so far outside of our, like, where we're at. Yeah. And so it was a lead that came directly to me, actually, in this situation through a friend. And I just referred it to another friend of mine who's a contractor up there. He was so stoked to get the lead. The lady was very happy that she got connected with someone local in her town. And like, we're better off for it because we could have spent hours bidding this job, maybe days. And ultimately we probably didn't have a chance of even winning.
Okay. So you landed on the biggest piece of scale, and I'm going to put a title to this. So we're creating a framework, but you're empowering your people, even with your lead, Justin, to have freedom within the framework. Okay. Yeah. So freedom within the framework means I have studied and I know my continuum of my ICP. I know what I want. I know what I can make money with, and I know when to hand it off or to say no. And you recognize, be that friend who's that contractor that's 15 minutes away in that other zone. Do you know how happy he is with you? Do you know how, just overjoyed that you're lifting everyone by, raising the water and letting everyone eat? It creates great synergy. It creates great reputation. And it also shows that you're a straight shooter to your clients. You know, you would never say, I said no to this person. Now you have a story where it's like, look, this is where we take care of our folks, and you're leading by example. But you need to have a system so everyone can have that same level of autonomy. And if you, let's say for our conversation here, you get outside of California, or you start, expanding more organically, put whatever you want within that structure. You need to understand your market. You need to understand your footprint, but there's a K&D methodology behind it that's taught and grown so that people recognize, who do we want to do business with? So ICP and account tiering, but being able to also have a non-ICP or a true disqualifier is important, because you can be busy or you can be profitable.
I love that. And that is like the epitome of the landscape industry in so many ways. So if someone is struggling, and let's take this in a step further, if someone has kind of moved into this and they've got a system in place,
sure,
and they're struggling to give the team freedom within the system, and freedom within the framework, as you said, what could be leading to that fear or that concern or that holdback of providing true freedom within the framework?
Well, you may have heard over your career, and you're a pilot too, and you don't jump in a plane without a checklist. You don't really make sure you have, enough fuel to and from a location and a little bit more. You don't just assume the weather. You really look. And there's a control tower. Okay. And so you have sometimes domains where there's ego. I have to micromanage what's going on. I have to have my fingers and everything. No one can sell like I can. So you have to trust the system. That's like trusting your plane and trusting your prep and trusting your plan. So you have to trust the system. So the system has to have a little bit of pressure test. Okay. So in terms of people who are saying, well, you need to do it this way and don't stray from this particular piece, there are certain times when you want to have a hard and fast rule. Okay. Sometimes it's for transparency. In your business, you have ERP and Aspire and different systems that are non-negotiable, because you need to have it work through both automation and control and understanding what's been bid. But there are certain points in that journey which a person has to make a judgment call, and you can't scale one person. And so coming back to your real, like your fundamental argument there is, what about, I have a process and I want everybody to follow it. What are the drop dead things they have to follow? And what are the things that you can give some ownership to? Because you can't scale one person. You have to scale a system.
Yeah. And I love that. I think the biggest issue there that I've noticed is those items are not identified and communicated. So then the sales process feels like this very strict document, and it's really, we're creating an argument in where it's actually impossible to run the same checklist for every job, every client. You've got to have some judgment there. And in pilotage, we call it aeronautical decision making. You can do all the plans in the world, and then you go to land, and 3 minutes out from landing, there's an incursion on the runway and the airport closes. Well, you've got to make a decision. Obviously, you can't just go land. So now you're up in the air, you're a bunch of other planes, your flight plan, boom. That's a perfect situation of, okay, now what do I do? And I think the client can throw curveballs in the meeting, in the phone, like they always do, just like you'll get a curveball in the air. And you've got to be able to think ahead and make decisions in the air as you're flying the plane, as you're working with the client. What do you think about that?
I think that's perfect, because there's a feast and famine kind of a situation. You can't be prepared as a pilot, or let's move this back to like landscape design with Jeremy. Okay.
Perfect.
There's as a pilot, you can't be prepared for everything, but you can be prepared for most things, and you can be aware of your situation. And when you have enough emergency landings or have to go to another airport or a microburst happens or the incursion happened, and you start figuring out, or you study other people's failures so that you don't fail. So one of the things that Jeremy, and I think you have done, especially with your Haven, is you found ways to make the process a little bit more rigid at the front end so that the criteria of what you want to spend time, money, and resources. So for everybody listening to the podcast, recognize time and resources. Those are the components that you can't get more of. Even if you scale time and resources. And so if you pick jobs that are beyond your budget, beyond your location, beyond your technology, beyond your market, that's on you. If you choose ones or do not choose opportunities that are going to fit your time and your resources, then you're happy and your clients are happy. So going back to the sense of landscape design, I worked extensively with Jeremy, and he was able to really define where he has automation and where he put rules in that allowed a person to determine, hey, this is a good design we're going to go after. And we put in some gates. And he said, this is a criteria, and this is going to happen, and we're going to share this. And if it stops there, great. No more time, no more resources. Thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I think it's very, very important to have those gates, have those triggers, if you will, of what triggers a we're not going any further. Thank you for the opportunity. We've got a referral if you're interested, but we're going to bow out of the process at this point. Or it's, hey, this is a bullseye. How can we allocate additional resources and time to it? And here is where I think it's this insidious seasonality and up and down of our industry.
Okay.
And of most trades industry. This is what happens. Companies become slow. They start whittling down a backlog. They're not sure what their crews are going to do in a couple weeks. So what do? They start to expand their availability. They start to go after projects not in their market. They start to say yes to things they normally say no to. They then start to lower their prices in the same fashion. So now they're stretching, going after non-ideal clients and lowering price. They sell a bunch of work because, well, they lowered their price and they're now in different markets they normally weren't in. They get all this work. Their backlog starts to build up. Their sales team is busy getting these jobs going and over to ops. Meanwhile, the phone is now ringing because all the people that are ideal clients are calling, but everyone's so busy with the non-profitable jobs that they're not getting back to people based on the sales process, based on what they know wins jobs. And they lose those profitable jobs that are 10 minutes away from their yard because they're an hour and a half on a job that they weren't even supposed to be on. And now you're in this cycle. And I see this like all the time in this industry, especially small businesses. I don't have the answers. I'm coming to you. How do we solve that problem? And what other comments do you have on it?
So let's dive deep into what you just said, Justin. Okay, so healthy but bleeding to death. Healthy but bleeding to death. Busy, or the perception of healthy. My crews are working, they're engaged, they're doing it. But if you were to step back and look at the numbers, you're barely breaking even, or you might be losing on a couple of these deals. And you're like, okay, how do you stop the snowball effect? And I think that let's take a look at a couple other component pieces. So an ICP is not going to necessarily help you with that busy but not profitable. Right. Okay. But when you start to really identify that buyer journey, and everybody, including people on the front line, understands what a buyer is actually buying and what they need. Now, that doesn't mean every person on the crew needs to be able to go sell, but they need to understand how to recognize different personas. Okay. Who are they talking to? How do they represent the company? But if I'm selling for you, who is my financial buyer? Who's my responsible group? What are those pieces that are happening? And so for the small or the medium-sized business that's like, hey, we just need to sell more. Sell more to who? Who is that persona that is really going to make a difference? And how are you going to say no or share that business with somebody who's actually better equipped to take that business? And so you have to create filters around that. So one of the interesting things I typically do is called an outreach prioritization matrix, and that goes bidirectionally. So in regular language, who do you want to speak with? You said it before. Who is the person you're dealing with? So
Right.
there's a list that you can write. Who are the people who can actually make the decision to go? And who are the people that are great to talk with, but are just going to waste your time? And then there's a little gray area in that Venn diagram who might want to talk a lot and might be your decision maker. So coming back to how do you really determine, is this something that's going to, you could actually make a criteria list and see, does this qualify or disqualify? You can
Right.
be able to do that. But when you're hungry or you need business or you have people who are waiting for jobs to happen, patience is not part of that cycle. And so I'll throw that back on you. When you've seen it in the industry, when you see that cycle of seasonality, what have you learned through your years in talking to your dad and in talking to hundreds, if not thousands of practitioners here? What are the key elements to go, this is a no and this is a winning yes?
Yeah, it's a great question, and everyone handles it a little bit differently based on their market and their client, right? We've kind of jumped around from maintenance to construction to residential and commercial, and you've found with us, it's very, very different in different markets, and if you're doing maintenance versus construction, residential versus commercial. And I do think each one has its own challenges around seasonality and around the persona. I think the biggest thing when we look at this feast and famine is when you're in the dry spell, when you don't have the work and you're struggling and you're scared and you're nervous and you're just, I'm going to say yes to everything, is having some level of like, don't fill the gas tank up 100% with bad gas, right? Like if you're on empty and you come up to a place that's kind of sketchy and it's like, this probably isn't great gas, but like, I need to get enough gas to get to the good gas station. So maybe just give yourself a quarter tank. Give yourself maybe a half tank. Don't sell your entire next month or two of work on bad gas or bad leads or bad jobs. Right. I think that's probably where I've noticed the people who have done well in these situations. They've gotten enough work to keep the crews busy, because the truth is the bad challenge and the truth of this is, if you don't sell anything, you're actually better off working on lower profit jobs than not working at all.
Sure.
And that's the hard truth of this industry. You'll lose team members, and that may be a controversial statement. I think some people would say, hey, it's better to sit the team than to do non-profit jobs. I would probably rather lose 2 or 3% for a few months and keep my entire team getting their 40 hours. But that's because our mission is not to be the most profitable, most expensive and the highest value landscape company in the world. Our goal is all around employees. So it's like we make decisions in that matrix. So don't sell your entire year's worth out on low jobs. And then the second half of that is go get the jobs you want. You're probably not doing much outreach. Orlando, you mentioned outreach a minute ago. What are we doing in this industry? Why does the landscape industry seem to be so poor when it comes, and maybe it's not just our industry, when it comes to truly doing outreach?
That is an interesting question. All right, so I don't want to lose the momentum, and I want to answer that as well as best I can. So Think about, there are phases to a landscaper in terms of starting their business, and it's almost like a little bit of a bell curve. They find their sweet spot, and then they start over, and then they start having issues, and then they might get too big, and then they might not be profitable. And like you said, there's evidence on each side of that bell curve of how you can be very busy and unprofitable, or you could be probably a little bit more busy so you don't lose your team, so that you actually stay in that sweet spot. And that might be a worthwhile exploration to chart through young, mature, experienced but losing money? Where do you fit along that bell curve? So coming back to the outreach, so let's talk about new and maybe that peak aspect of it. So I don't think anybody teaches a landscaper how to do advertising and marketing. I think what they do is they find that their work and their jobs and their signs and their word of mouth is good. And then a marketer comes to them and says, hey, I will market you for X amount of dollars and you'll be able to convert that on your cost of acquisition. And the landscaper goes, don't understand what you're saying.
Right.
And I think that layer of, I can tell you all about fertilizer and mulch and when you should water and what we should do and how we should xeriscape and where you should get your equipment and where should you get your supplies and what we're going to do on the season and how we're going to irrigate versus how am I going to get leads in my target market? So I think the disconnect there is those who do this type of work don't ever get trained outside of the type of work that you do. And outside of maybe like I'll pitch the disruptors in terms of like you look at a bigger part of you have to look at the holistic system and how do you build a revenue engine. And if I'm just a landscaper, I need to educate myself on how other landscapers grow. So that would be my 2 cents on that.
I appreciate it. I would agree. It's not something that is commonplace in our industry to go and learn about business or learn about marketing or learn about sales. It's like, who's the best horticulturalist? Who understands trees or pavers or hardscape better? And they end up becoming the most successful from 0 to 1 million. But it's right around this 1 to 3 million is where things get really complicated and you stop scaling because of what you mentioned earlier. You can't scale one person. And one person can sell 3 million a year. So, you can get to 3, maybe even 5 million and maybe even 10 million with AI and some of the stuff we're seeing. But I don't think that's a great, that's probably not a great life looking at that entrepreneur running 5 to 10 million without, scale systems. That's a challenge.
Right. And so let's lay out one time, what does that look like? So we got a new landscaper. And they have figured out who they, in their mind, their ideal customer profile. They may have the bullseye target. They might say, I don't want to work with this level. I don't want to work under this budget. I don't want to work this far away from home. These are the personas that I need to be ready for. I want to talk to them about their pain points. It's the board of the homeowners association. It's the person who's running the landscaping for this business park. Oh, it's actually this entire area that's beachfront property. Great. Got it. That's my buyer personas. And I map out my buyer journey. So I realize what's going to happen in these phases. I'm actually going to do qualification. And if I qualify them, I can move it on to discovery. And in discovery, we got a couple of things that we want to bring to the table. We want to bring our value propositions. We want to have our elevator pitches in our pocket based on those personas. So they're written, targeted to the person we're going to talk to. Then we don't live in a vacuum. We don't market in a bubble. We don't sell to one person at one time. There's competitive influences. So we need to have competitive differentiation. And if you only take one thing from what I say today is never badmouth a competitor, because that's the best way to get a reputation in any industry. And you can fill in the blank here that you're okay. So competitive differentiation helps you be positive and show why you're better than your peers in a particular place at a particular time. And then the most important part of your sales process. In your sales playbook, not only do you have a structure that goes qualification, discovery, proposal, negotiation, close in that basic format, you need to have discovery. And deep discovery means that you understand the personas so that you can almost give them the answers before they ask for them. But in a Socratic approach, in a sequence where you ask questions and you allow that person to give their answers, that person has said what they need. And if you've got your buyer journey laid out, you can scale that. And so your discovery questions, your objection handling, how you script, how you actually roll out that playbook, all becomes a matter of fact. It becomes that framework. It becomes that opportunity for everyone in your organization to learn how to sell your way.
Wow. Thank you for that, laying that out. I think it's so important that we can see and visualize that. And
it
when,
is, it's the beginning of that sales system and the sales process, and everybody can say they have it, and everybody can use it or not use it. But you'll see if it's not documented, it's just hearsay and guessing and shadow work.
And I think that's why when I look at some companies that are in the disruptors and they have one or two salespeople that sell 3 or 4 million, and one or two salespeople who sell less than $1 million every year. And they're like, man, these two people just really, really do well. And I don't know why my other 2 salespeople just can't seem to come close to the same numbers. A lot of times what I find is they don't have a well-documented discovery process as part of their sales process. So these 2 have figured out, oh, it's an HOA board president. I already know these 3 issues they're dealing with. Boom, boom, boom. I come to the table ready to go. And the others are like, I'm going to just say it, they're probably talking over the client, and the client doesn't feel heard. The potential client, the prospect, does not feel heard because they're assuming the same problems they just came from, the residential homeowner, are going to be the same problems the property manager are dealing, and the same problems the HOA board president are dealing with. All different personas, all very different problems. So when we talk about this process from lead, discovery, walk us through that one more time so we can visualize it. And then the question is, what is the step that most sales teams miss when you don't have this process documented?
Okay, so I'm going to set the table first, and then I'm going to walk through that process, and then I will recognize that sometimes it depends along that process. So let's say step 0 for everyone listening is prospecting. How are you going to generate your leads? Well, remember we said we need to know who your ideal customer profile is and who your persona is. That's going to help if you're doing in-house or you're having somebody be a marketer for you of who are you trying to get awareness with. Okay, so the prospecting is step 0. Then you have a lead at step 1. And that lead could be warm. It could be very hot. They could have called you. It could have been a handoff. But there's some mechanism that they get put into that funnel, and a lead has been identified. Now you get into qualification. So I'm going to pause for a moment. I'm going to take a step back with you, Justin. So if we were selling widgets, and we wanted to be feature sellers. My widget's better than your widget. My widget has 5 pieces. Your widget has 6 pieces. Maybe your widget costs too much. I'm just feature selling. And you said, I might not be listening to my buyer journey, to my persona, to my client, and let them tell me what they really need. And so I'm listening to them, and all I want to do is feature dump. I hate to say this, but you don't want verbal diarrhea from a salesperson because they're not listening. So that's feature selling. Then you can get into solution selling. You say, well, Orlando, we're pretty close to the solution selling. I'm saying, yeah, but I think we can do better. So even on the other end of that might be insight selling. So that you're helping guide as a consultant that client. Okay, so we're back. We've got prospecting, stage 0. We've got lead, stage 1. Stage 2, we might have qualification. Now, happy ears. I need to stay busy. I need to make my number. This is the first big area where people make a leap. Salespeople want to make their money. They want to make you happy. They're people pleasers, but they also want a pocketbook filled. So qualification may be along that continuum, not really a bullseye, not really in that gradient, really black and white at the end, and they still take the deal, or at least they take the qualification to discovery. And so in discovery, are you being really honest and asking the questions to really figure out how you're going to help them? Is it going to be maintenance? Is it going to be construction? Is it going to be landscape architecture? What is it? Or could it be a blend of all of them if you're really listening to what they might need over time? And then you are able to put it into the system and control it put a bid to it, and actually put a proposal that actually reflects who K&D is. Everything we've done, you could scale to other businesses. All right, now how do we close? Do we ever offer discounts? If we do offer discounts, why? We need to track that and understand, is there anything we need to understand early in that conversation that we don't offer discounts? Well, the price you get is the price we offer, so that they psychologically know. You can ask, but we mentioned it at the beginning. Then you close, and it's probably the most important piece is the handoff to operations, so that that work gets done at a K&D level. So you lay out that particular process. I teased, it depends. Qualification is a good part. Discovery, you leave a question unasked. Sometimes, and I've put this into some of my sales playbooks, Justin, is there any question I didn't ask today that I need to know before we go forward? Open that door so that you allow that prospect to walk through it on their own terms. Thank you.
I just wanted to let that sit for a minute because I think that was really well said. The point that I picked up is you mentioned in discovery, we're past qualification. We're in stage, let's say stage 3 or 4 here. We're in discovery. They've been qualified. We're meeting with them. And they say 3 things that are absolute no-goes for us. Like whatever they are, we've just decided we don't do business with this type of client. But since you're in discovery, you're already past they're already qualified. So what do? You mentioned happy ears, right? You just kind of, you don't hear that, and you hear the good part around their budget's $200,000, and that's a green. So we're going to go forward. And so you start to ignore the red flags in discovery because in your mind, you've already gotten through the qualification phase. But I picked up on this fact of like, you can move a client out of the cycle in a respectful manner at any point in the process, including discovery, including prior to actually proposing, because that might actually save everybody, including your reputation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if I really look at your system, Justin, and we say, okay, you've got a lead come in, and we're going to qualify, and we're going to do the consultation. And this feels like a winner. It's good. It's in zone. It's in budget. It's going to be a long-term relationship. And we start gathering our details. And then we start hearing those bells. And we're like, but this is such a good budget. And this is a great client. But you also recognize this client has fired the last 5 landscapers. And they don't just fire them. They burn down the bridge. They go public. They go on Facebook. Everybody sees what happens. And it's very, very public. But it's good money. And so you're like, okay, can I walk away from a bidding stage? Or do I bid this? Or do I overbid it so high that they don't want it? To make it unsavory for them? No, I think what ends up happening is you start recognizing, when do you land that plane? So you gave us a scenario where you have everything planned and you're coming in and all of a sudden you can't land at that airport. And I think that's the same situation we're in right now, is you recognize as a seller, I could land, but I'm going to put myself in danger and put the airport in danger. I can't do this. This is not what I've been taught to do. Do I want to put it down on a highway? No. Is there a close airport that I can get to with my fuel? Yes. So recognize when the opportunity is right, and recognize when you need to take an off-ramp or land at a different airport.
Well said. Yeah. And this is all, the last 45, 50 minutes here has been building a case, in my opinion, unintentionally, on why it's so important to have a documented sales process. Because all of what we're talking about, just throw it out the window if you don't have a documented sales process, and every single time a lead comes in, or you go out to do some cold calling or office visits, you're starting fresh. Like you have no system to follow. And we did this for decades, right? And we were fairly successful. So it's not like you can't make money and be successful without a sales process. I think what we're seeing is when you have one, you can be more strategic and
Mhm.
you can actually sit here and have the conversations that you and I are having, which I really want to thank you for this conversation style in the podcast, because this could have easily been almost just a one-on-one coaching session for K&D about how we're doing things, but people are able to drop in and listen to it as well on the podcast. So I think that's where this has been really, really fun. Now, Orlando, I want to ask you, just as we start to kind of land the plane here in the podcast in the next 5-10 minutes, what are some things we didn't cover today that you feel are really, really important for people to know about sales process or sales transformation, right? Your title.
Yeah, and sales transformation is coming in and understanding what's your business motion. That's probably the thing that I have learned the most, Justin, is landscapers sell differently from lifestyle, differently from plastic injection molders, different from people who sell services to do tower work. I've got steel and galvanized steel clients who sell, and maybe they have two tiers of clients. They don't sell directly to a business, they sell through a distributor. And so what I've learned is there is no one size fits all. You can hear Steve in my ears. Okay. There is no one size fits all. And you have to tailor what you're building in your transformation. And the transformation is from where you are today to where you want to be in the future. And we already hit on this heavy. The sales process and the sales playbook should be evergreen. And if they're not, So I've got an auditor or a revenue system architect who works with me, and she has a home in Bandera, Texas, and in Calgary, Canada. And when we do revenue maturity audits, Justin, we have this saying that if you can't produce a document in 48 hours, it doesn't exist. So if you can tell me that you're following something, show me. So in that show me, and if you have a system laid out, you already mentioned it, strategically, and I'm going to use the word tactically, you can figure out how you want to revise and update that process. Going back to our plane conversation again, if I start messing or monkeying around with your pre-flight checklist, are you really sure that everything has been checked? Could I refine it? Sure. But if you have it documented, now you can audit. Are you doing everything effectively? Which means you can start understanding where and when your sales force, the people who have got your name on their shirts, are actually using the process. So they may have freedom within the framework, but you can actually see and give them coaching or give them more sales training or help them understand where they may have a blind spot because you have a system. So having that system allows you to actually get over the perceived hump of, I have to figure it out every time. I have to invent it every time. I have to have a person shadow what I do. It allows you to teach everybody else. It allows you to scale. It allows you to customize. And then it also allows you to do a baseline and figure out what levers you can pull in those time and resources to increase those revenue outcomes. So it allows you a system to actually tune that revenue engine. Thanks.
Love that. And the tuning is where we find that 10x return on time.
Yeah.
And we can push our way to 2x. We can double our sales numbers with the team we have with just pure will. We're going to work weekends and nights, and we're going to just hit the phones, boom, boom. We're going to run harder. And I believe with that mindset and with the right team, you can 2x your outcome. But with what we're talking about, with what you're describing, explaining, and walking us through today, that is how I believe you 10x your outcome with actually less work. And Dr. Benjamin Hardy wrote a book on this called 10x is easier than 2x. And it's the idea that when you put in the right systems and then you tactically and strategically improve those systems, your team starts to have this compounding improvement effect where over the course of a few years, you can become just in a complete new level of sales performance, happiness, financial reward at all levels. It leads to the right outcomes that most business owners are out there trying to accomplish. And that's why this Trades Talk exists. This is why the podcast exists, is to help raise the bar. So thank you for doing your part today and sharing this with me. Orlando, before we wrap, I ask every guest for a trade secret. And it's a bit of a trademark here. So I'll ask you, what is your trade secret today?
So it might be that tribal knowledge trap. Okay. Because what ends up happening is I think you already mentioned a little bit about it, which is it's a performance paradox. It's the idea that the best improvisation only happens outside of a rigid script. I can't, don't put a constraint on me. Don't put a sales process on me. I need to breathe. I need to have that ability to be myself. Well, dude, did you get out of bed in the morning? Did you take a shower? You have breakfast, you get in a car, drive on a road? Yeah. Did you improvise that? No. Okay. Can you follow normal steps? Yeah, I can do that. That's it. Because if you're having to figure out willpower, and you have to willpower every single day, it's going to be really hard to be motivated on every single call and every single no and every single grind and every single lead versus stop taking it personally. Fall into a system, get into a rhythm, figure out what you need to do, and allow yourself to enjoy the ride and actually build a business. So everyone who can hear my voice, everyone who can hear Justin's voice, everyone who listens to this podcast, your secret is go get yourself, if you sell and you have sellers and you have real people talking to real people, get a sales process transformation, meaning document what you do, why you do it, who you do it for, so that everyone can learn it in your company and you can improve it and make everyone's life better. That's my secret.
I love it. It's probably one of the best gifts you can give your team is building and giving them a sales process. So Orlando, thank you for coming on Trades Talk. And if people wanted to find you, talk to you, ask you some questions, what's a good way to get a hold of you?
The three best ways, I'm a big LinkedIn guy. I've been in LinkedIn for over 20 years, so you can jump me and you could jump on my LinkedIn profile. It's Orlando S. Castillo. I'll give you a little freebie there in a second. And then you can also find me on our website, which is thesalescollective.com, Orlando-Castillo-profile. But on LinkedIn, it's Orlando S. Castillo. And a lot of people use automation. Isn't that right, Justin? Everybody kind of has that little campaign that goes out there. So for years, I've added the S at the end of my name, Orlando S. And so when I get a mailer or a cold call or an email or something that says Orlando S, I know where they got it. And I know that a person is not actually taking care of it. So I'll get invites that say Orlando S. But big career guy, big sales guy, big LinkedIn guy. So if you hear my voice and you want to talk sales, hit me up on LinkedIn, hit me up on thesalescollective.com. Be happy to visit with you.
That's a fantastic offer. Thank you for that. And I'll drop those links in the show notes that you're listening to right now. So you can just scroll down, click on the LinkedIn, give them a follow. Orlando posts some great stuff and it's always worth a read. So Orlando, thank you so much for coming on Trades Talk. Ton of knowledge today.
It's been my honor, Justin. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Trades Talk, where the next generation of disruptors comes to raise the bar. If you got value from today's episode, share it with someone in the trades who's ready to level up. For more tools, insights, and community, follow host Justin White and join the movement at jwhitegroup.com.